Hi guys, Mr. Talbot here for you. We're going to be going into our second topic for Unit 4. So we're looking at nationalism. So this is going to be kind of the process of what we're going to call nation states being created. And think of these as countries that are kind of centered more around the people and less around the leader. The guy in the bottom left here is Father Hidalgo, and he's going to be the kind of the original leader of the Mexican War of Independence, kind of unifying the Mexican people towards this common cause of making their own nation. Um, so in some ways, it's going to be very much kind of a carryover what we saw with the Enlightenment, but there's some new elements that are kind of kicking in place at the same time. This is coming a little bit after the Enlightenment, so there are some nationalism feelings in the Enlightenment, in the United States, in Mexico, and Latin America, but we're going to see some other things that are happening. But people are beginning to think of themselves on a more large scale for a region, kind of looking at okay, groups of people what are some things that we have in common? A big one during this time is going to be language. In a lot of countries, it's going to be religion and kind of the social customs, what you eat, the way you dress, how your family units are oriented, all those kind of things that make a group of people unique. And then also kind of the territory, who's inhabiting the same area. Um, the some clever political leaders are going to realize we have a lot of things in common in these different places. We can unify. That's going to make us stronger. And so when we think of the nation, in most cases, think of the same people in the same place. In some ways, for this topic, we kind of got to leave the United States mentality behind because the United States, we know, we're a really, really big country and really, really diverse. A lot of different religions, a lot of different languages, a lot of different ethnicities. That's not really the case, particularly in parts of Latin America at this time, as well as parts of Europe. So that idea of same people, same place works better there than it's going to work in the United States. Which is why this is somewhat different than what we see with some of the Enlightenment or Atlantic revolutions. Um, but we get these idea of new nation states. Again, the nation is the people. Okay, the French nation is the French people. France is the French nation state. So it's the country that the people kind of are in charge of. And so with this, we're going to see kind of some previously fragmented areas like Japan, like what you see in the map here, Italy, like Germany, that they were these smaller kingdoms with kind of smaller lords, whatever, are going to become bigger, more unified country. Combining in this map all the people that speak Italian and have Italian culture are going to be combined into the new nation state of Italy. So the idea of, being Italian, being French, being Mexican is really a relatively new idea in world history, kind of talking the last 200 years or so. Um, so what's driving all of this is this idea of nationalism. So what is nationalism? It's this feeling of you are connected to this larger group, to this nation. And that common bond comes through, like we talked before, religion, ethnicity a lot of times, language. Well, one of the things that's happening is because of things like the printing press, information's being spread beyond those smaller communities. So now people can say, oh man, yeah, this idea of German, well, I speak that too. So there's this sense of Germanness or sense of Italianness. In a lot of places, ethnically, people are fairly similar. Again, kind of got to leave the United States idea behind for a moment. Um, so we see the picture of Martin Luther here, and that's because Luther translated the Bible from Latin into German. This helped standardize the German dialect from being kind of, 50 different forms of German, really down to just like 2 different forms of German, thanks to Martin Luther. That helps create a bigger sense of unity in what's going to become Germany. Now, all of this so far is good. This is stuff that's going to be key in helping you become an independent country, key in helping you unify and become bigger and stronger. The downside is that nationalism, on one level is like a sense of patriotism and pride and love of your country. And I kind of think of it this way. So if I'm patriotic, I love my country and I'm proud of my country and I want to be a good citizen and do good things for my country. That's patriotism. When you can get into the dark side of nationalism, it's where you start thinking, my country is so great that everybody else's country sucks and they're not good at all, and we should take them over and do things to them because we're better. We don't need to worry about them. We can do whatever we want because we're better than them. And the other dark side is within these, sometimes there's ethnic minorities and religious minorities. Well, they're not really part of our nation, our people. so we should get rid of them or discriminate against them. And so that's kind of can be the dark side of nationalism, and it can be a feature of genocide. So a lot of good with nationalism, but there is that dark side to keep in mind. The dark side's really going to come out once we get to the world wars, but for this first 100 years, it's mostly good stuff, becoming stronger countries, more power being with the people, and new nation states being formed. So where is this taking place? Well, we see it particularly in Europe and in the Americas, but we're also going to see it in Japan and China. Again, people are moving around a little bit more. There's more travel and transportation. There's also, again, this age of exploration. So you can kind of see with more people traveling and more information, you can kind of see that, oh, the people that live here are different than the people that live here. So we that live here, since we got more in common than people over there, we should be our own nation. That's going to be something that we're going to see take place. We talked about the standardization of literacy and printing. And we're going to see kind of large empires are going to kind of start shrinking as individual nation states rise up in independence. We see places like Mexico rise up against Spain. Brazil is going to get its independence from Portugal. The Ottoman Empire is going to break up in the Middle East and North Africa. Russia is going to have some different conflicts. So we see kind of all of those things happen. And this is a big challenge to the traditional rulers, like those absolute monarchs and things like, and the emperors and things like that. And this is connected to that enlightenment idea of popular sovereignty. The people is where the power comes from. So the consent of the government. So again, all these things we talked about in the past, they're all kind of connected here as we get into this idea of nationalism. For a lot of countries, your racial and ethnic identity is a big part of that. And that, again, like I said, means that sometimes the ethnic minorities are going to be discriminated against. And also, it created a problem. So the guy that we see a picture of here, his name is Simón Bolívar. And he kind of comes to prominence down in South America, places like Peru, Bolivia, Venezuela. He somewhat wanted to make one big Latin American nation that would become independent from Spain. The problem, he realized that, Mexicans want a country just for Mexicans. And Colombians want a country just for Colombians, and Bolivians are going to want a country just for Bolivia. So those different ethnic groups want their own country. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a big challenge to empires, and those may be trying to build empires. And so we can see, though, the positive of it was, again, it made these people realize, hey, we're Peruvian. We're not like the Spanish. We should join together and fight and get rid of the Spanish. Hey, we're Mexican. We should fight and get rid of Mexico. So we see from 1800 to 1830, pretty much all of Latin America becomes an independent country, and various different independent countries at that. 30 years is not that long historically speaking, so the huge, huge changes led in part by that guy, Simón Bolívar. So the big thing like we've been talking about is this idea of nationalism. It was happening all over the world and all around about the same time. Well, that's not random. There's some things that are taking place here. You've got the Industrial Revolution. So with that, you're going to see the first countries that were industrializing were these new nation states, more modern kind of countries. Places like England became a nation state. The USA was definitely a nation state. France under Napoleon becomes a nation state, where people are loyal to the country, not so much a leader. They become the most powerful because of the Industrial Revolution. Well, if you're Japan, if you're Germany, if you're a German and you're in these small kingdoms, if you're in Italy, you're looking at all these, man, we can't compete if we don't get bigger and stronger and unify. So that's going to kind of lead to some changes. And we're going to get into Japan more in our next topic. We're going to see Japan is going to say, we got to change our traditional way to do things. And the samurai are going to have to go. We got to become modernized. We got to become a unified country. So we have that unification in Japan. We see it in Germany. We see it in Italy. It's also going to be challenging these empires like we talked about in Latin America, in North Africa. This idea of self-determination. The Mexican people should be able to determine who their ruler is. The Brazilian people should be able to determine who the ruler is, not just because some monarch in Europe sent some conquistadors over. So that's a big change. Germany's a case study we're going to look at here again. It was a lot of very small kingdoms, but one big kingdom, that was Prussia. Now, Prussia's big and powerful, got a guy named Bismarck in charge of him. And Prussia is different than Russia. That can be a little confusing. But Prussia, they speak German. They're ethnically German. A lot of German culture with the Prussians. But they're looking, as big and as great as our military is, we got this much bigger power play over here, Russia. We've got an empire to our south in Austria-Hungary. Napoleon marched right across all of our German kingdoms. We also got England's getting more powerful. The Dutch, the little stinking Dutch, have their own empire. So holy cow, we got to modernize. And so the Prussian kingdom kind of takes over the rest of Germany, and they're going to kind of help unify and create Germany. The challenge, like we talk about with nationalism, is always determining who is in the nation. So if you look at the map here, that's bigger than the current state of Germany, and that's going to be some problems in future wars with France and in the world wars that are coming. We talked about the big challenges here is that self-determination. It's going to cause these bigger empires to start breaking up. We're also going to see within different regions, as rulers try and hold on to power, ethnic cleansing is going to happen. So again, this is happening all over the world. So we're seeing rising up in Latin America against the Spanish. We're going to see ethnic tension within the Russian Empire, and some smaller states push for their own self-determination. We see it in North Africa and the Balkans against the Ottomans. We see it with the Irish and in India against the British Empire. So all over the world, all being pushed by nationalism. So let's recap. Nationalism is this common bond that is felt between people. Usually it's based on culture, religion, ethnicity, as well as sharing the same territory. Now sometimes we can see this where there's an attempt to grow nationalism when people aren't all in the same region, and we see this like the Jewish diaspora. So there's a sense of Jewish nationalism, even if you don't live in Israel. But we'd say Israel is the nation state of Israel because it is a nation of Jewish people in a formal country with a government. Sometimes we'll see Pan-Africanism, which is the idea of, if you're of African descent, you have the sense of African nationalism. But again, that's not something we see at this time because that's not creating a big African nation. Finally, we're creating new nation states. That's going to cause the breakup of old empires, and there will be ethnic conflict within those nation states. So hopefully you guys have some good stuff here. Don't forget to do your stuff.